One of the main reasons I've used this photo is because sometimes we can feel like we're in a dark place going through those teenage years, but there is absolutely light at the end of the tunnel, and we've got to be focused on that as parents in terms of there is a rainbow beyond the clouds. And what the whole purpose of today is about finding a way to deliver less stress, having better well-being, and just feeling like you're being more successful as a parent, and also for the teenager to feel they're more successful, and life joy, because you know what, a lot of that's been knocked out of us with COVID over the last few years, and we need to start reclaiming it, I think, in our lives as adults, but also as teenagers. So it's about going on a learning journey, and that starts with you as much as your teenager. And I think that's really important. And to understand as a parent, we can't anticipate all the needs of our children, but we can get better at it. And the more we can get better at it, the better the journey that we both will have. So it's about benefiting you and your teenager, and to create meaningful connection, because we're hardwired for it. You know, out in the savannah, all those years ago, millions and millions of years ago, if we weren't part of the group and we were slung out, we were probably going to die. So it's embedded in all of us, that connection, and it's seriously important. So why might you be here? Well, these are some examples I've come up with from speaking to parents. And I'd love it if you have other reasons to be here, that you stick it in the chat so I can learn from that. But most people have an active interest in their teenager, in their well-being, in their education and their success. They want them to do well. You know, we're here to help them grow, really care and want to do the best and get the right thing for them right now. And it's difficult because the world is changing. You know, what used to be the norm when we were growing up, and as, you know, adults growing up, there were certain pathways that people took. This is all being disrupted, and can be difficult to know what to do. Want to be sure that they make smart future decisions in our uncertain world. And it does feel very uncertain to them. And so knowing what to do can be very challenging. But I also think it's really important that a lot of people don't have good relationships with their parents. And there may be somebody in the room right now that does as well. And if you're here, it probably means that you don't want to repeat that pattern. And you know that you'll want your kids to want you around when you're older, when they've gone through the teenage years. It's really also important that there's strained communication with your teenagers. And because they're programmed to take risks, you need to be there when they come in against those rocks. You need to be the lighthouse rather than the helicopter parent. They don't need helicopter parenting. They get enough scrutiny as it is already. And so it's being able to create that. And it's also at this age about meaningful connection, so that they know that you are there when other people aren't. We send them out into the world. And the lovely analogy I had was, it's like you've got to fill them up like a milk bottle with lots of love, because when you send them out into the world, it starts to be reduced, and you've got to be the source of that love and connection for them. Okay, and they're also not likely to think that you're the fountain of knowledge anymore. You know, what used to, mommy and daddy used to say this, and they always knew best. You know, that's not the space they're in. And so you have to have different skills to engage with them, because what would have worked in the past isn't necessarily going to work going forward. So before I rattle on anymore, it's really important that we get a review of what's going on in your world right now, in terms of your relationship with your teenager. Now, I don't know if this applies to all of you, but these are questions that I ask all the time. Where's the starting point? You know, if you think about, list your concerns about your teenager, how do these feel and make you react? Your annoyances about them, how do these feel and make you react? What brings you joy with your teenager, and how does that make you feel and react? And where is your focus? Is it on the concerns or annoyances, or is it about creating more of that joy? And what outcome do you want to create with your teenager? You know, what's your ideal goal? Because when we have a focus and we take action towards it, and we are very clear about where we want to land, that makes it all the difference in terms of how we can choose to behave. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you about creating this outcome? So I'm going to let Fiona put you into a breakout room now, and then you can have a discussion on that.
So before you go into the breakout room, if you can take a photograph of this slide, so you've got access to these questions, and then, or take a screenshot, whichever works best for you. And then Mick, can you put people into groups of about 3 or 4?
And just to add one thing, a concern might be, you know, they're having a real problem with their friends, especially girls. You find that a lot. There's a lot of nastiness that can go on, basically, and that can have a really big impact. An annoyance could be just that they never clean up after them, you know, those irritating things that they do all the time.
Like, seriously, we needed about 50 minutes for that conversation.
Yeah, I know.
We were coming off the turnbuckle. We got halfway through question 1. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, so what were some of the irritations and annoyances that were coming up for people?
For me, the issue is the difference in culture, I think, between the maybe it's just our age, but we were talking about we're used to sitting around the table and having discussion when we were youngsters. Now it's so difficult to get them out of their room, off their devices, and their social interaction with their friends is all through devices, and they see that as normal. But for us, we see that as antisocial. So I don't know whether it's a problem, maybe for their generation not, but maybe we need to change our ways in some respect.
Yeah, I think we were discussing something similar about the issues that the last 2 years, especially with spending so much time digitally connecting with people, that their inability to connect on a personal level is different, and the way they're going about it and the interaction with others has changed as well as part of that process.
When we went on holiday, I remembered being a teenager and not wanting to go on holiday with my family, but obviously I had no choice. And when I got there, I had 2 weeks with my family and I couldn't contact any of my friends unless I wrote a postcard. And so I had no contact with them for 2 weeks. And all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends. They can hang out with their friends anytime they like with their phone or their... And so we were doing things like, you will come out for a walk for 2 hours and then you can go back onto your device. And that was like, whoa, like unbelievable. And then we'd and they literally were like all the time, how long have we got left? How long have we got left? How long have we got left? And what time is it? Is it 45 minutes? And there was a couple of times where we completely lost it with them and going, we're in Switzerland. We've been stuck in the house for 2 years. Why the hell aren't you looking at the view? And they're like, oh God, my friend's got, I was just like, yeah, there were days where we totally lost it, for sure.
But you know what, and that's my personal view. I think we also need to kind of change because I think devices and technology are going to be part and parcel. So I'll just share something which happened in the last 10 minutes. I'm at home today, didn't go to office, working from home. My son came and the moment came back from school and he's straight on his phone. And I'm like, hey, Ranveer, you just came and you're straight on your phone. Oh, Dad, you don't understand. Today's weekend, so all my 11 friends are going to come and play cricket. So I'm organizing as to who all is coming and what time we're meeting where. So I think their communication styles have also changed as to what it used to be and what it is now, right? So very, very different in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's something we'll get used to. And I'm not so concerned in that that's the interaction they have with their age group. It's just when you move that up a notch into a work environment, as children, we have the confidence to walk into a room, shake someone's hand and hold a conversation because that's what we were taught by our parents. Whereas now, you don't get 3 words out of them. And I think when they move into a work environment, they'll be a little bit socially distanced because they just don't interact.
Yes,
but then maybe that's the new normal.
That's the conversation that Nick and Duncan in my group started off with. It was working on our kids' confidences so that they have the confidence in themselves. How do you, I don't know, teach that or bring them to that for the many different scenarios, either at school or, like you mentioned, even at work, the ability to stand up and know when to speak. And our conversation started off like that, and then went on to also the communication factor. How was your day at school? Good. How are your friends? Good. Everything's good. And I think it was Nick who's got older children than me, gave some good insight of that coming naturally. So instead of maybe that interrogation, which I tend to do because you're starving for information, promoting an environment where it becomes a normal conversation, and it's finding that normalcy around the being on the phone the whole time and everything else. So I really enjoyed that, Nick and Duncan.
Yeah, Robert, we said, just building on that, we were talking about actually, you can ask them 20, 30 questions in a row and only get one word answers. But if you create the right context for the conversation, then it comes to you. So I know that I can, I'll ask them a million questions, but if I take them out for a meal, when there's food in front of them and outside of our house, it has to be out of our house. Whenever they're out of their normal environment, that's when we get the best out of them. So, I mean, I'm still, they're only 15 and 17, so I'm only still learning that, but you just know that in order to get anything out of them, you've got to change the context. I think was something we were talking about.
And I love that, Duncan. I think that piece around the meal being a really important component, and also us role modeling as well. Like, I know we're massive around no devices during mealtime, no TV on during mealtime, and just having conversations, and to Emer's point, role modeling joy, laughing about things and setting up context. I love the comment where my daughter said, "Oh, Mum, you're my best friend," and my wife responded with, "Don't be a loser. I'm your mum. I'm not here to be your best friend." And that we got involved in dialogue and said, we want you to have mates outside of us. We're your parents, and we're really clear about that. But we want to enjoy that role, and we want you to go and have your mates in the way that you want to have them. But this meal is about us connecting. How do we connect in that way? Yeah. And bringing humor and joy in that way, I think, is such an important piece.
Okay. All right.
Let's go back, because Emer's going to unravel this a bit further for us.
Okay. So I'll I share screen now again? Do I? Is that what I do? Yeah. There we go. I'm already on the screen. I just don't know if I'm going to get it twice. Oh, there we go. There we go. So that's a topic for conversation, and obviously you can spend a lot of time around it, and it was really interesting to hear the feedback on it. Now let me see. There we go. But this is a real self-awareness alert for you guys. Teenagers are not on the same page as you, which you totally recognized. They look more grown up on the outside than they are on the inside. And even though they're on their devices all day and they're looking, like happy or not happy, what you'll often find is they're really struggling because they're not getting that real connection, which you're talking about, which is so valuable. There's what I find in a lot of my work is that in order to really connect with them, you've got to really understand their world. They can look okay on the outside, but they're not. They're struggling. And what I'm finding is that it doesn't matter if they come from affluent backgrounds. It doesn't matter if they go to the best schools. It doesn't matter if they've got successful parents. There is nothing that's guaranteed to protect them from their sense of struggle. They're struggling to appreciate themselves because there's all these comparisons all the time, 24/7 with their friends. They can connect 24/7 if they want to. They're really struggling to focus because there's such data overload. They are often feeling really overwhelmed and anxious, and they're losing confidence. That's what I see. And a lot of them are also fearful about their future, even if they seem to be fine and they're doing, they look like it's all, all's cool in my world. And because they're having those meaningful conversations with you or with, people who can give them some really good information, so they're often stuck in their head and they're really, really struggling. What I also find is that because they live in such a noisy, data-driven world, which is really judgmental as well, and also because there's so much media out there that, it pumps out fear every day because that's what sells stories. We read stories about things that are going to be fearful. They're absorbing all of this. And what they're struggling to do is find the space and the time and the privacy to identify who they are, because they're continually being told, you need to be this, you need to be that, you need to be the other, you need to look like this, you need to act like this, you can't behave like that because you won't be accepted. What they're really struggling to do is be themselves, because there's so many influences that we never had growing up. And when you're constantly bombarded with how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to behave, how you're going to fit in, it's very hard for them to switch off and identify who they truly are. And they don't trust a lot of their own abilities, because we have an education system, it's 100 years old. It's pumping them full of information daily too. And so all that inner knowing that they would have had, I see it in my own little kids when they know who they are, they know what they're good at, but they get so much external data pumped into them that there's no room for that anymore. And they've almost got lost themselves in the mix. So for so many of them, they're feeling sad, they're feeling anxious, and you may not see it. So that's why I'm saying trying to get that connection is really important. And I love the example of taking them out for a meal, taking them outside their normal zone, because you'll struggle to get them off their phones. And because of their brain, there's only being 80% ability to function. They've got so many distractions, they're probably not going to hear you. So you have to really create that space in order for them to do it. So this is a little video that where's that gone? A little video that I've put together in terms of the negative cycle a lot of young people are finding themselves in. And just for an example, the data exposure we currently get on a daily basis now is exactly the same as what someone got in a whole lifetime in the 19th century. And it's not going away anytime fast.
In this fast-paced modern world, many young people are in a negative cycle that affects their well-being and ability to thrive and perform. There is 1, general data overload, fast-paced technology, unfiltered social media, and adult judgment. You don't get to run free, play, and be much on your own anymore, as previous generations did. Broken boundaries and unrealistic social comparisons all feed stress and anxiety levels. 2, struggle to switch off. Lack of skills to calm the mind and filter out negative information overload stops the ability to focus and believe you can create what you want in life. The fear of missing out and an untrained, overactive brain creates feelings of being overwhelmed, confused, unfocused, and uncertain. 3, the teenage brain is only 80% mature until the early 20s. The frontal lobe's key functioning powers involving concentration, planning, problem solving, decision-making, judgment, emotional expression, insight, reflection, etc. are all work in progress skills. So executed poorly, they can impact quality decision-making, positive outcomes, and confidence. 4.
Yes, we haven't got anybody to look after you, Henry. We don't have anybody to look after you.
Motivations and strengths, and what other strengths are needed to learn to cope with life's challenging situations. Formal education teaches and fills students up with so much external knowledge that nurturing and development of natural inner knowing is neglected. 5. The missing inner foundation of knowing creates a lack of grounding, develops uncertainties, and adds fear and tension around identity, capabilities, and where one belongs in the world and where the future path lies. 6. Unchecked limiting beliefs, along with poor assumptions and a lack of future path clarity, all feeds one's resistance to not act towards making change happen. Delays impact learning, performance, and the ultimate momentum action builds. A goal without action will forever remain a dream. 7. This mix moves you beyond your comfort and learning zones into the freak out zone. Feelings of being overwhelmed, unfocused, stuck, anxious, stressed, lost, sad, losing confidence, fearing failure, and the ability to survive this negative cycle without an off switch impacts daily well-being and performance.
Now, there may be a lot of you saying, that's not my kid. And hopefully that is what you're saying. But I can tell you, we have a tsunami on the way. And you can tell because we've got 12-year-olds who are self-harming, you know, I've had research with 13-year-olds, and they're worried about the job they're going to have. I mean, I'm not being funny. When I was 13, jobs weren't even on the horizon. I was just about thinking about them when I came out of university. So you've got to understand they feel huge expectation. They feel huge pressure to be perfect, to do well, and to fit in. And the fear of not fitting in is massive for them. Absolutely. And I hear things like, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel totally overwhelmed. I feel waves of shame when I don't get things right. I feel like I'm just a failure. And there's a lot of that stuff that's going on that may not be evident to us as parents because they're presenting something totally different. And it's like for some of them, they feel like they're on an ever-going production line that they can't get off. And the kind of fun and joy of just being able to go off and do what you want isn't there anymore. It's all pre-programmed for them. It's like being in a job that you don't really like. You don't have the best boss, and you're on a continual performance review. And you don't have any good climate measures within that. So clarity of direction, well, at the end of it, what am I going to get? What am I going to end up doing? I don't get enough recognition for who I truly am, even though I can't kind of figure that out. I'm also not necessarily getting the reward I want. I can't be innovative in terms of how I do things. And, if you were to have that in a business, you wouldn't have any employees because they wouldn't stay. So I'm just saying, don't underestimate the pressure they're under. Okay. So why do they may not fully connect with you? There's a number of different reasons for this. It's often a fear, and loss of love is a big one. They have an internal story based on past experiences. So if I did X last time, I got the Y result, then something similar happens in the future. They make the wrong assumption that they're going to get the same criticism. And I will say the biggest thing you can do with them right now is judge them. They get it from every direction. You have to be that neutral space where you just accept them from what they are. And when they screw up, you recognize that they've screwed up, but you remove the judgment from the situation. It's really, really important. And also they have the lack of brain maturity, which we know. And we know that sometimes we can say things to teenagers that are meant in the best sense, but ultimately, because they're in that limbic mode most of the time, they'll feel more fear than normal, and they'll feel a lack of ability to speak their own truth. And actually, this is some other reasons why they come up. These are standard ones that I hear all the time, why they won't connect with their parents. And I did an exercise yesterday with a number of parents, and I actually asked them, as an adult, when was the last time you couldn't speak your truth? Because we still do it as adults. And what was the reason behind that? And what I was fascinated to see was the variety of different reasons within these that came up. So we don't always have the same story that we tell ourselves. Some were feeling vulnerable, embarrassed, guilty, powerless, that they couldn't say their truth. Others I just didn't want to upset, they wouldn't understand. And I have a story for a young girl who had a great relationship with her mum prior to being a teenager, and then it all just seemed to fall apart afterwards. She had a real issue with her girlfriends in school, a lot of pressure there. She didn't fit in, didn't look the part, didn't have the right handbag, can you believe it? And so she found a group that actually, she felt she ended up in the wrong crowd. And then as a result of that, so desperate to belong, had a boyfriend that ended up abusing her, emptying her bank account, ended up going to parties where there were drugs and drink, and her parents didn't know any of it. She would say she was going to X, but she was actually in Y. And it wasn't until they got a call one day where she collapsed because she'd been at a party and she drank too much, that they started to unravel what the problem was. And the reason for her was, I didn't want to be punished. I didn't want to be controlled. I didn't want you to make a fuss. She got herself in so deep and she felt such shame about where she was. She didn't feel she could say what needed to be said. So just be aware how they perceive us. The limbic brain is in action, not our brains. So they're coming from a totally different space. Okay, so what's really important here is the quality of our relationships is one of the most significant factors to impact our physical and mental health. Full stop. You know, you can have people who drink, who take drugs, who have eating disorders, but you can bet your bottom dollar at the bottom of all of that is the quality of the relationship they have with themselves or the quality of the relationship they have with a significant other. So we should not underestimate at all the impact of poor relationships on our teenagers. They're desperate for connection. And as you've just described earlier in your exercise, they're not getting meaningful connection in the way that they need to. They've got a limbic system, you know, where we can read other people's emotions when we're right next to them. When you're on a phone, you can't really feel what that person's feeling. And actually their ability to communicate with each other can be so harsh because of that. You know, when I was growing up, if you had a boyfriend and you needed to split up with them, you had to tell them. You had to go to them and tell them face to face. And that was the worst bit. It actually made you think next time you wanted another boyfriend, do I really like this one? Because I have the memory of maybe I'll have to tell them I don't want to be with them anymore. Now they can do it by text. And that's really, really hard, you know. And also just if you can just put yourself in their shoes, I'm sure you've all had a time where you've had a really difficult relationship in your life. Think about the impact and the stress that can create. That feeling of dread when you walk through a door, whether it's a boss or a partner or a friend that you've fallen out with. It's like a million times harder for them. So to support your teenager to thrive, you need to understand that they need quality connection with you before anything else, even if their behavior is pushing you away. It's a fundamental foundation block for connection. And it also teaches them what meaningful, loving relationships are, because they're disconnected from that in some ways. You know, we can talk about online porn. They think that's what sex is like. It's not, but that's what they're picking up from that world. And so it's dysfunctional. Just be aware what they see. They don't always challenge in the same way that they need to. Because that is, you know, they've got this virtual world and real world is the same for them. But you know, you and I both know it's not. They are two different worlds. Okay, so quality communication, quality connection, but we need to be able to manage what I would call our world filter. And I would say it because I do it when I throw my toys out of the pram. And because it's not perfect. And I want to show you a short video that I've created for young people to explain this point about our unique filters. If I can find the thing to put it on, here we go. So oops. I show that to young people so that at least they understand that we have unique filters and that they'll have a different filter to their parent. But sometimes parents need to understand that as well. And when we can really stand in each other's shoes, that's really, really important. And for me, it's about depersonalizing the mission. Where do you want to be? What you want to achieve? And just trying to remove the emotion as much as possible from your reactions when they're driving you crazy. And the other thing that's really important to look at is our desperate need to give feedback as parents. It's the second most human essential need. So 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water. I keep saying 3 weeks without food because I'm not sure I could survive for 3 months, to be honest with you. But a minimum of 3 hours without feedback. And what would be really interesting is, you know, the next 24 hours, see how many times you have the desire to give feedback to somebody. And we're often not very good at it because what comes from our world ends up going into their view of the world, and it's not landing properly because we're not really standing in their shoes to understand that they do have a different perspective to us. It's way too big a topic for now, so I've given a sheet to Fiona that you can have at the end that you can take away with you in terms of feedback. It kind of looks at how feedback, the model of feedback, and how we can get stuck on the different levels. And it also gives you key tips to look at in terms of how you communicate with feedback. For example, what's your motivation behind the feedback? What are you getting out of it? Because most people are usually getting something. And is it absolutely necessary now? So there's a whole sheet on that. So I'll let you get on, read that afterwards. And then it's about the quality of the feedback that we're giving them. Where are we on the emotional scale? This is a scale that was created by Sir David Hawkins. It's the levels of consciousness scale. And when we're aware that our different emotions have different vibrations, it has a big impact on how we're landing with our teenagers. Now, in order to be able to get up into those higher level emotions, if we're stuck in the lower one, it's very difficult for us to move up that ladder. And so, and be just being aware how we're landing with them in terms of our emotion. And, you know, if you're improving your emotional engagement with them, then your communication will automatically improve. And think about where you're putting your power. And what is your teenager learning from your behavior if you are in those lower areas? And be mindful, if they've done something and they're not feeling good, and they're feeling shame and they're feeling guilt, and you're struggling to remain calm, you're only going to reinforce those negative emotions in them, which causes a problem. Okay, and we also have something that's called bad day behavior, all of us. And it's as a result of our predisposed behaviors that were formed by the time we're 6 or 7. And it's the combination of those. When we're stressed, we end up in a bad day behavior. Basically, we will tend to have a preference for one of these when we're stressed. So for example, mine, when I'm on bad day, I'm not too demanding, I'm quite agreeable, I can be submissive and unclear in how I communicate, because there's a fear that I won't get what I want. When I get really stressed, I can hop into the red bad day. And that can really kind of impact people in how they see me. Well, you're never like that, Emer. Why are you behaving like that? It's because I didn't get what I wanted in my previous bad day. So then I move into this red day. And we all have a space in which we occupy here. And where we need to be is in the blue confidence zone, where we're clear about what we want. We're assertive and feel comfortable in being able to say it, but we also do it in a very interested and respectful way. And this can be measured in everyone. It's an easy thing to be able to measure. And when communication can get really confused with teenagers. I know of one young teenager split up with her boyfriend, she was an orange bad day, ended up taking drugs, drinking, and her parents saw her orange day as someone who just didn't care. Actually, when you were able to assess her, she had a high need to be accepted, didn't want to feel left out, had a really high motivational need for harmony. And so being able to speak her truth was difficult, especially because she had a stepdad who could be really a lot in the bad day, in the red bad day behavior. And as a result of that, she knew from her past experience, if she said anything or tried to defend herself, it would be very difficult for her to do that. She'd been given an amazing place at a university, but because she was really struggling to be able to communicate, she couldn't feel why she had so little confidence. She wanted to be able to defer, but felt she couldn't say it. And she got so overwhelmed. She so didn't want to let people down. She so didn't want to not perform. She loved her parents, but just didn't know what to do. She tried to take her own life. This is how it can be so extreme for them, because they're not connecting the dots in the way that we connect the dots. Thankfully, she's still with us. So don't underestimate the power of assuming that they have a particular behavior, but actually there's something else behind it. Okay, so I'm going to skip quickly because I think we've had a lot of time. So what stops us from being in the blue confidence zone? It's stress primarily. And it's how we're hardwired in terms of why we choose that particular space, and be it our bad days. And if you just look, this is a global study of adults showing experiencing multiple kinds of stress, particularly since the pandemic, because most of us don't like tension that uncertainty brings in our lives. We like to know where we're going, and our teenagers are no different. And you can see these increases in these different areas of stress that people have had. And I did a workshop yesterday, and it was quite surprising for a number of parents when they started to look at those individual parts of their lives where they were experiencing more of that than they were actually aware of. So I don't know, so I'm not going to spell these out. I'm sure you can get a copy of this need be. Okay, so another quick self-awareness exercise for you guys is to think about your emotions, and you can see where the benefit is of being in those higher level emotions. You're in your power rather than trying to force something through. Write down the number of times you had these emotions in the past month. What were the triggers and what were your experiences of that emotion? And which of your emotions had an underlying fear? Because normally it's our fear and our stress that creates the negative emotions.
So we're just going to have a quick 1 to 2 minute pause so people can actually just do this for themselves, having a look at this slide. So if you just want to take time to have a look at this. If anybody would like to share, then please feel free, but you can also just keep it to yourself. Does anyone want to share? So I'm hoping that everybody's in the pink and purple section then. That's why they don't.
I think this is really important to be able to tell your children this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, this is where we need to be. We can do more of this, and you're going to feel so much better. So teach them about their emotions and where they bring them, and what it creates inside them. So you can tell me, Fiona, when I should go or shouldn't go. I'm not quite sure.
I think that might be enough. I think everybody's had a chance to have a think about that and reflect. Okay. They can reflect further in their own time.
Okay. So what's the value of understanding all this stuff? Fear gets in the way of being able to communicate effectively, full stop. We all have bad days. We all have our bad day behavior. So you need to be aware of what this creates. And we all make up stories, and so does your teenager, about the reality as we see it, but they have less tools to cope. We're actually all a work in progress. Don't think it's just them. They need you to be the good adult in your life, in their lives, who's available to them, especially in times of need. Because your presence is one of the strongest predictors of their good mental health, by supporting them to develop their self-esteem, their self-belonging, how they cope or they do not cope with their difficulties, because they will have difficulties trying to figure everything out. Even us adults still do. And the absence of a good adult can be exceptionally harmful, because it significantly relates to their level of depression, suicide, self-harm at a vulnerable time in their lives, when mental health difficulties emerge in the early adolescence and peak in their late teens and early 20s. Self-doubt can overwhelm them. And I tell you what, if I was exposed to what they're exposed to now, I would have a lot of self-doubt. I had it without any of this stuff. And I know what the consequences were for me. So even if they appear on the outside well-adjusted and confident, and sometimes we can see the total opposite, fears about fitting in, relationships, and their future are top concerns. So knowing that being your good adult is one of the hardest but vital jobs you will ever do. You have got to be that courageous, reasoned adult in the room. You have to be bringing them joy, because you know what? They hang out with their friends because they're having fun with their friends. They do want to talk because they talk to their friends. And I know loads of them talk to me and they don't know me from Adam. So they do want to find that space, and it's about creating that environment in which they will want to talk to you too. They're still the child, even though they may look like they're the adult. And blue behavior is the way to go. Clear in your communication with a real concern for impact. And stress and fear will not drive the best outcomes when you engage with them. So whose world do you operate from? I guess that's the question. And that's why stepping into their shoes is really important, because self-awareness and empathy are the first steps towards making change happen. And I really like this slide, because 2-year-olds can show an appreciation that other people hold a perspective, different perspectives to their own, because they're naturally curious. They're not burdened with experience. They're not burdened with concepts or how we should think in the world. And we shouldn't forget that if they can do it at 2, and we could do it at 2, we can still do it as adults. So here's some empathy building pointers. Consider their thoughts. If I were in his or her position, what would I be thinking right now? Focus on their feelings. Being in his or her position, what would that make me feel? Express your concerns. You're behaving so loudly, I can hardly hear what you're saying. Inquire about challenges they may feel, but timing is everything with teenagers. If they're distracted or they're talking to their friends or they're doing whatever, it's not going to work. You know, the car is a great place. They're next to you. They tend to not be on all their devices. And actually, you're not staring at them. So it actually creates a really nice comfort zone that you can have that engagement, or that lovely, you know, taking them out for a meal. Just take them out of the environment. Go somewhere where they're going to have some fun. Check in and ask those open questions, but actually be very mindful about how much they want to share. If they know that you're trying to tell them something or help them, which is all about their safety, and so that they can thrive, they're much more likely to respond. If you're really criticizing their friends, you might be on dodgy territory, because they gotta kind of figure some of that stuff out for themselves. So quality information being fed into them, even though they look like they're not looking or listening to you, is really useful. And telling your own stories is really powerful too, about how you could have struggled with things, because it enables, when you can show that you're vulnerable, it enables them to be vulnerable with you too. And listen to their responses without interruption. Remember our desire for feedback. And sometimes they may be reflective thinkers and they need that little bit longer in order to be able to say what they think. I love the Nancy Klein approach, which is, what do you think? What else do you think? If I could remove that assumption, what would you think then? So stop the desire to tell them what to do. Appreciate their point of view, ask what they think. They don't get asked that question nearly enough these days. They get told a lot of things, but they don't get asked the question. People may not remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. They are desperate for connection. And the fact that they're on their devices all the time should be telling you that. But you've got to build healthy debate and focus on a better outcome without fear and be in that blue confidence zone. And why would you do it? Nearly 1 in 3 adolescents aged 13 to 18 will experience an anxiety disorder. Poor mental health means pupils are 3 times more likely not to pass 5 GCSEs or the equivalent wherever you are. They don't have the skills to cope, and you adding more fear and judgment in impacts confidence and well-being. Science tells us that well-being, learning, and performance are totally linked, and you can't achieve high performance learning outcomes without well-being. So if you want them to be learning, we need to create the environment in which they're much more likely to be able to do it. So this is just one more thing. It's in a self-awareness essential. It would be good, Fiona, if you want to take over from this, where somebody can take a picture of this and then they can go into that breakout room. This is where they're at. They've got brain data overload, they can't focus. Their brain is only 80% operational, so they struggle to connect the dots in the way that you will. They feel they have little control in their lives. They've got an inner voice that's like an untrained puppy. So it's not feeling calm, and they don't often have skills to know how to make it feel calm. They have less insight, emotional regulation, and planning skills. They don't fully appreciate themselves, and they don't always have the best support network, because they talk to their friends and they may not talk to you. And actually their friends may not come up with the best ideas because they'll be limited in the same way. They think other people's lives are better than them. They have unfiltered judgment, misunderstanding, and fear, because I know limbic system is going rather than the prefrontal cortex, and they all feel this can be quite a regular thing in their lives. So I'll let you take over here, Fiona. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. I think, is it the next slide we need to take a photograph of with the questions on?
They may want to take a photo of this one too, just to remember.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if you want to take a photograph of this slide, so you have to put yourself in this frame of mind. Yeah, in this, so that you're like a teenager is trying to remember back to that, which is quite a while ago for me, but I do remember it. I do remember it. So yeah, if you can, as Emer's pointed this out, and then we're going to ask some questions, I think, in the next.
There's another just picture to take afterwards, and they can go in and have a look at this.
If you take
time, I'm like, oh my God, are we all right with time?
No, we're fine. We're fine. Keep going.
Are we okay to go to the next slide so they can take a picture?
Yeah.
This brings us back to our initial questions. Your concerns, how do you think you can react and feel differently now? Your annoyances, how do you think you can react and feel differently now? And what brings you joy? And what can you do to create more joy for both of you to bring you up that higher level energy scale? And list 3 things that you'll do differently with your teenager now, and how confident you think you are about creating that outcome.
There were some interesting insights in our room. Duncan, what did you, well, can you just clarify what you found you would change or maybe do differently?
I think sort of, well, one that there was a, you know, my big sort of aha was actually there's more going on in their heads than is visible. Yeah. So there's more going on in their heads, and they have a need, you know, what really resonated with me, they've got a desperate need for connection, whereas I certainly don't feel the need that, you know, I don't feel that. But as you say, if they're connecting on their devices, then that's one thing. So that was a big aha for me. And then I think what we talked about was trying to, you know, in terms of trying to create that moment, we talked about, you know, either us sharing our expectations of what that might look like, but also getting their views on it. And I gave an example, you know, my boys are coming out, you know, half term, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, and maybe we ask them how they feel they should be spending that time, how much time they want to be on the screen, how much time they want to be doing exercise, how much time they should be studying for GCSEs. So actually giving them a little bit of responsibility, accountability, and a stake in the game for making that decision, we thought could be a solution as well to how so they almost sort of dictating how to spend that time together as well.
Yeah. And that empowers them in terms of their ability to make quality decisions.
Yeah, and we said that sometimes actually you can be surprised with what they come back with. So, how much time do you think you should spend on your screen? And they sometimes go for lower than they probably normally would anyway. So you get a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Would anybody else like to share their insights so far? Steve?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've taken away from it today is to just create a platform where you can have that discussion with them, moving away from just the dinner table in the house, going out for dinner. One of the things me and Rachel were talking about was going on holidays, doing things they like. They're a bit more relaxed, a bit more open, and you have better conversations in that type of environment.
Yeah, I love that, Steve. I think I've taken a lot away from this as well and most of it's just back to what we say as coaches anyway. Are we asking better questions? Or are we involved in telling? Because what we know is we don't like to be told. And so kids typically don't like to be told either. But are we asking great questions? And if we're asking great questions in there, and have we got some tools to fall back on? Shane and I were talking about a tool that I love, which is called Cure, which is, when I first hear it, first of all, composure. And well, let me be composed. Let me not go, because typically that's taken me nowhere. Secondly, understanding. Let me put myself in my kid's shoes. If I was my kid, do I understand the perspective they're coming from? The next one, which I think we all love, is recovery. Okay, I'm not with this at the moment. Can we sleep on it and have a talk about it tomorrow? Give myself a bit of space to recover. And then the last one, and I think Duncan talked about it really well, expectations. Okay, let's all of us set the expectations that we have. If we're going to make this decision, what are we expecting? Yeah, and let's all decide. And so one of the things that I love to learn from is golf, because golf makes me human. Because typically with golf, my only plan was to try harder, and that typically doesn't work when I'm just trying harder, and it doesn't work with raising kids either. If all I've got is effort, I'm typically in trouble. But if I've got some tools to fall back on, I'll typically be a bit better. So arm yourself with some tools, I think, as well. And like, we're going to give you some access to some of Emer's tools. And I think, luck is not a method and hope is not a strategy. So try and give yourself some tools. And so I really got a lot out of that, which is cool.
Rachel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, one thing that has made me really reflect is about their perception of my judgment. So I think, I'm trying, and I've definitely been more successful in the last couple of months when I've been really focused on it, about putting more intention to create that composure that Mick was talking about, so that we've got a better playing field on which to start. However, even when I think I'm being neutral, am I really, from his perspective? Probably not. I think my teenager's main angst and grumpiness with me is that my expectations were too high, and that I tell too much. So even when I think I'm not, I've got to be aware that that's already his line. So I need to back off even more than that in order to compensate for the ideas he's already got about me.
Yeah. Because often for them, the past experience, they assume that's going to be their future experience.
Exactly. So I have to try doubly hard to cope with those two things.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So I think there's a few slides left. We can see what we can fit in.
Squeeze in before I get chucked out of here. So there we go. You got your time. So I do share screen. Right. So where are we? Where is my thingy gone? Just out of the way. Bear with me. Where is it? There we go. Okay, taking things up a level. So for me, it's really important you have a good connection with them. It's really important they develop a quality connection with themselves to cope with the world we live in. That's the next piece. And the chances of you having exactly the same thinking and doing, managing emotions and communication style as your teenager is 1 in a quintillion, which is a billion, which is more than there are people on the planet. And some more perspective, seeing as some of you are in Dubai, that's a 7 quintillion grains of sand on Earth. And I've worked for way too many years now developing a tool that can actually identify what they are in teenagers. So that, when they understand who they are and they appreciate what makes them tick, they have a better understanding of what it is that they want, and they're able to articulate it better, because that's something they can really struggle to do. And I find it's transformational when I use it to coach, just to try and figure out, who are you? Oh wow, I hear things like, I just feel like a whole weight has been left off my shoulders. I'm not crazy. I understand why I do that now. So that's really powerful. And what is it that successful people do differently? They're self-aware, they're curious, and they know what they want. They know their strengths and they can play to them. And they don't know what their strengths are. They know their gaps, because for every strength, we have a gap. And they manage these. They either learn new skills to bridge the gap, or they get good at getting other people to help them and asking for help. They get into a climate in which they can thrive. And that's what I mentioned earlier. One of the biggest components in a good climate is clarity of direction. Because if we know where we're headed, it's much easier to take action and get there and push through all the resistance and other things that can show up. But when you don't know, when you feel you're in the fog and you're overwhelmed, you're in the mist, you don't go anywhere. There's fear everywhere. Successful people manage fear and keep learning and growing. And they take action on goals without knowing the how of it all. So they can't work out all the process. It doesn't matter. They know where they're headed, and they just keep taking action, because when they're in that momentum, action creates momentum, and it makes things happen. And so this is why I've come up with a positive cycle for young people.
To create a positive cycle of well-being, performance, success, and life joy, tapping into the secrets of what successful people do differently is a smart move. 1. Create calm to feel grounded and refocused. It empowers the ability to cut through the unhelpful noise and distractions in life, which don't serve us as well. Access to more valuable, obvious information is then possible. This supports connecting the right dots to make more quality decisions, so action and energy can be focused on delivering better outcomes. 2. Build self-awareness. Identify natural talents, strengths, and motivations. Understand what kind of environment will best support you to thrive and fly, so you can put yourself in it more often. This knowledge is possible to access quickly. 3. Play to strengths and discover how to develop more strengths to support navigating life when things get challenging. This moves you from your comfort zone to a positive learning zone, where more resources are created and can be used to deliver the desired outcome. 4. Clarity on what the end result is. It is seen, heard, felt, and often acted upon daily. Knowing what you want and why that outcome is in tune with you, while striving for something that serves both yourself and others, is a powerful factor in delivering success. 5. Understand what the right goal and outcome structure is needed for success. This in part includes focus, action, getting it done, having fun, and keeping an open mind on the route to achieve success. There is often more than one way, and they are comfortable with the tension of not always knowing the how. 6. Recognize internal blockers for success along with behaviors likely to trigger resistance to achieving it. See failure as an essential part of the learning process and value the insights it brings to be able to get better next time. 7. Know what supports their individual well-being and their areas of struggle. See seeking help as a positive. It develops confidence, better performance outcomes, and keeps you firmly on track towards what you want to achieve.
And for me, these are key components that you incorporate into the training, and having a tool that can measure strengths and motivations, what your natural talents and where your, what your predisposed behaviors are that you're comfortable with, and then those ones that you're not comfortable with, which will show your stresses, knowing where your what your comfort zone elements are, and also knowing what the things you need in order to feel that you're going to build confidence. They're really powerful insights for young people, because then they can start to go and seek more of that in their lives to make them feel better. And also that whole success failure thing, I had one teenager actually at university turned around and said to me, I feel like I'm being watched all the time and someone's expecting me to fail, because that's the sort of pressure they're under. So last piece, and I'll be quick and then I'll let you go on about your merry ways, is something that I call the magic bridge. And the reason I think it's so important is because there is a hidden crisis that has the potential to erupt for us. The old way of raising our kids is no longer enough, because they're living in a different world and they need new tools to be able to understand who they are and find what I would call their anchor, without being blown around at sea with so much influences that they can't tune into that inner knowing. There's too much noise, there's too much judgment, and there's absolutely too much fear of failure, and they feel the pressure. And that's why I created this.
To find the solution to move from the negative cycle to the positive cycle, the 7Q Fast Track TeenReconnect Formula creates a magic bridge. It defines 7 informed golden nugget steps to take, which include 1. Quieten the mind. Learn how you can refocus to manage the daily data overload so meaningful action can be taken. 2. Quest for self-awareness. Know yourself first is the key solution step to discovering what you want and need to thrive in the world. 3. Query beliefs. Beliefs are an integral part of you, but unchecked, they can trip you up along the way if they are limiting and remain undiscovered. 4. Question resistance. Unfamiliar, challenging, and uncertain possibilities make you resist change, so revealing it is essential for desired end results. 5. Qualify success mindset. To understand how it is to have one. 6. Quiz goal structure. Be sure that you're seeking the right goal for yourself. 7. Quality roadmap guide. Fast track informative tools and techniques to enhance your life skills. The magic bridge allows you to successfully leave all the negative cycle in your head and connect with the positive cycle of your heart and your full potential. Then life can really be lived without the limitation of unfounded fears.
So we need more joy. We have an amazing ability to create that in them so that they're not fearful, because when we're in fear, we don't learn, we don't thrive. Unless, of course, you got a tiger running after you in the jungle, then you do need to run, but there's not too many of them around at the moment. But there is this drip feed of fear into their lives that we have to be able to manage, and we have to give them the tools to be able to manage it too, because we didn't have that growing up to the same extent. If you were bullied at school in the past, you could at least come home and it didn't follow you home. And they don't run around like they used to, because we're fearful just to let them run free. And that's an amazingly and fabulous grounding place for them to be, and to be able to make mistakes and make decisions without our watchful eye of judgment. They spend way too much time with us, if you ask me. Teenagers, they should be able to be out there, but we've created a world, and so we need to give them the tools to cope. So that's that. And the real life value, I think, is priceless, because I know what the statistics are for 12-year-olds who are self-harming. It's crazy, because they don't feel in control and they don't feel able to cope. And I think there's a lot more of it on the horizon. Right, so that was me. I don't know if we have any time left for questions. I think we're dead on half past.
I think we're dead on time. So if people do have questions, because I know people have got to go off now, please drop an email to be Limitless, or to me, or to Emer. Her email's there if you want to take a note. And Emer will come back with an answer or direct you for further information. And Emer is doing masterclasses, so an extended version of this. This is a really a condensed session that she's very kindly put together. Emer and I have known each other for quite some time. So thank you very much again for taking the time, and thank you to everyone for taking the time this afternoon to come and take part. And it's been recorded, so hopefully those people who weren't able to make it will be able to watch the video. So if anybody's got anything to say, please say it now, otherwise we're going to end the session.
Brilliant
session. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One of the fundamentals that we speak about a lot is increased awareness leads to decreased judgment, and decreased judgment always leads to increased performance. So if we spend less time judging people and more time, we always increase the awareness. And once we're increasing awareness, the decrease in judgment always leads to people performing better. And that's a real fundamental for To Be Limitless, is we're always about helping people be more aware, and then the rest can take care of itself. I found this an absolutely phenomenal session. So many great tools. And it is, I work with CEOs all over the world, and I'm constantly amazed at how often the role of parent becomes such a key piece. Organizations, it's happened twice this week. And for all of us, as we said at the start, doesn't come with an instruction manual how to be a parent and how to raise kids. And so I think it's increasing tools like this, increasing awareness like this is just such an important piece. So I for one, am really, really thankful for the insights that have come out of today. So thanks.
And I'm very grateful for you letting me come and speak to you too. Thank you very much for sharing your what is a lovely group. It's a lovely thing that you have going on here.
Yeah, so just on top of that, I'd also like to thank Fiona, who's put so much time, effort and energy into this afternoon session. As most of the people in this group are key parts of our community, you're aware that we have coaches built around multiple skill sets. Fiona does a lot of work for us around EQ, high performance well-being, and our Friday sessions. Yes, Friday sessions now we've normalized with the rest of the world. Last Friday of every month we hold a Friday session. I'm looking forward to next month's and hoping that it is somewhere in the ballpark of the quality that we've had today. So thank you to everyone for joining us. I'll be stopping the recording now, and